Scanos luego. So, um, my name is Lance Logan Key. Uh, I've been asked to talk a little bit about Gunny Quio, the good mind. Um, Maintaining a good mind during um, these times that we're going through right now. Because it can be very difficult to self-isolate, be in quarantine, um, get cabin fever, basically. And there's a lot of things that go along with that. The same four walls, metaphorically or literally speaking. The same people. One thing I've talked to a few clients with, a few other people that I've talked to about this isolation thing, is you really get to learn who the people are that you live with, and that can be eye-opening. Things that may have been um, endearing because you didn't see it all that often can become irritating because you're seeing it all the time. A bit irritating, but it was cute. Now it's a lot irritating. So, um, basically, with Gunny Quio, part how I understand it, how I've come to understand it, is that it has a lot to do with how you conduct yourself in relationships, and that can be in relationship to anything, other people, your pets, your environment, yourself. So this Gunny Quio is a guideline on how to approach those things, how you interact, how you take in information, how you process the information, um, how you make decisions, how you implement those decisions, how you go forward. So um, usually when I talk about Gunny Quio, what I try to do is not just give you a lot of flowery words and ideas and theories. I try to give you a little bit of nuts and bolts. You know, this is how you can do it. I try not to dictate, just because I don't really consider myself any kind of an expert. What I am is I'm a person who has grown up in longhouse tradition, um, been taught a lot, learned a lot, observed a lot, um, come to my own conclusions, and a lot of things I talk about are my way of interpreting those. Um, I've always been attracted to people who can take those teachings and uh, teach them, give it back in a way that is digestible for everyone. Because that's the way I grew up. I grew up with uh, teachers, uh, family, close friends, close people that were older than me in the longhouse, and they were very blunt. So sometimes that could have been crass blunt, uh, but very straightforward. So they didn't do a lot of flowery language, so I try not to do any of that myself. Now, mind you, I try not to be crass, but I do try to be blunt, so it's clear what I'm saying. Um, Now, normally, I would be interacting with you, so I would always offer that opportunity to, if anything I say is unclear, you get a chance to let me know that it's not clear, and you can question me on those things. Because this is a recorded video, you're not going to have that. So I'm going to do everything I can to be as clear as possible, so that nothing is left to ambiguity. So that it's very clear that this is what I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to give you. So going into, before I start all of that, I'm going to give you a little bit of, just really quick, who I am. So like I said, Lance Logan Key, that's my English name. Um, my real name is Skalhibi. It's Kyoga language, and it means other side of heaven. So I'm Mohawk, I'm Wolf Clan. Um, like I said, born and raised in Longhouse tradition, um, with a lot of very learned people who their way of teaching these things was not, I guess now you would call it the stereotypical, gathering of people and saying, I'm going to teach you this. That's not how I learned these things. I learned these things in the course of everyday living. We'd be in the middle of something, planting in a garden or doing chores or just sitting around watching TV or something like that. And someone who knew something would say, that reminds me of something, or that's kind of related to this, and then they'd give us a piece of it. So there was nothing this, there wasn't any of this sitting down for half a day listening to a teacher. More what it was they would give us these little pieces, and as we got older, me, my brothers, my sister, um, when we would go to ask questions, less and less did we get the answers back. More what we got was a question. So, in essence, what they were doing was they were teaching us how to process what we were observing and what we were seeing and what we were thinking. And that's, in essence, that's the Gunny Quill that I understand very well. So, that's a lot of what I do. I'll give back that information because that's the way I was taught it. They were teaching us how to think. They're teaching us how to process, and really, that is the essence of true Gunny Quill. In basic terms, they talk about Gunny Quill as positive thinking, wishing the best for other people, wishing for the best outcome, which is all part of it. But that's incomplete because it's also about how do you think? How have you trained your mind to process that information? To truly have Gunny Quill, you have to have both. You have to know how to think. And that was how we grew up. We'd ask a question, and questions were being asked of us. What about this? Well, did you take into consideration this? Do you see how it impacts that? And then we'd have to answer those questions. So eventually, by the time I was in my late teens, I very rarely asked those questions because I had been trained, without even knowing it, how to process the information. So I found in now a 28-year career and still ongoing career as a counselor, I find myself in that position of when I'm working with people, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm helping them process in their mind. And generally, how my observation is, counselors who are good counselors, that's a lot of what they do. They don't give you answers. They help you come up with your answers. And generally, that is what I understand Gunny Quill to be. And so, before we get into that, it's probably a good idea to understand why we have Gunny Quill. As a concept, as a basis for Haudenosaunee culture. And that came from the Peacemaker. So that's a long story, and I'm not going to go into that story because, well, we don't have the time for that. But generally speaking, it came from a time of calamity. And a lot of the teachings that we have came out of some sort of calamity or hardship that our people were enduring, and we needed something, and we were sent messengers. So the Peacemaker is one of those messengers. He was given a teaching about peace because our people were not being peaceful. And he had to go through a lot of work, a lot of trials, a lot of tests to show that this word, that the great law of peace, was going to help our people. And when they tell the story, sometimes it sounds like this happened from the springtime to the fall time, but actually it took a few years, a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, a lot of adding things to it as they went. So, but basically, that word of peace was this: Gunny Quill, the good mind, and how not just that. How do we do it? How do we build it? How do we protect it? How do we renew it? All of those things. How to create a leadership that embodies it, and how does that leadership prove to the people that this is the way to go, this is the way to be. Yeah, so that's basically what it came down to. was what are the ideas behind building this gunny quill. So a lot of it came with how do we interact with each other, how do we get along. So if you really pay attention to Haudenosaunee teachings and pay attention to the way that we process things, um, we talk about protocols and ceremony life. So just as a little insight into in my upbringing, um, ceremony was a lot of that life. Uh, and I'm talking about like the big longhouse ceremonies going on a regular basis. Um, and it took a while before I started to understand that ceremony um, was is not the end all and be all of this process. It's either the beginning or the temporary ending of this process. I know there are a lot of people who um, it's all about ceremony, and that's fine if that's how they want to do it. But it's also about how you do the everyday mundane things. Um, Not just how do you approach a ceremony and how do you conduct yourself in the ceremony, but how do you conduct yourself at home? How do you conduct yourself in your relationships? Um, how do you treat your animals? How do you treat your pets? How do you treat your home? Um, it's an everyday thing. It's an ongoing process. So protocols become very, very important. Um, so protocol, that can be a big fancy word, but really all protocol is your routines. You know, all the things that go into a routine, why you do your routine, um, what are you hoping to get out of the routine, and in your everyday life, when does the routine need to change? For example, we have changing seasons, spring, fall, winter, summer. Um, you're not going to wear winter clothes in summer. I mean, you can if you want, but it's going to be very hot, so your routines will change. That means your protocols will change. Um, Ceremony life kind of teaches us that. So how I break that down, just an understanding of a basic tradition protocol, you can even call it a ceremony, is you wake up in the morning, um, you get up out of bed, you go to the bathroom, you do your business, wash your hands and face, um, and come out and start your day. You do that every day. If you take any one of those things and put it out of order, it really changes the direction. Like you don't wake up, go to the bathroom, and then get out of bed, right? There's a protocol to a process. So that's basically what it is. It's teaching you how to go through things in a practical, pragmatic, in a way that makes sense, right? So generally speaking, that's what this is about. Because if your end goal, in terms of your relationships, is um, harmonious relationships, then it's not just a thing that happens or that you hope for. There's actually a process that you have to go through and that you have to renew and that you have to continually do to maintain that. And that's a lot of what that Gunner Quiva is about. What we're looking at is what are those traits of a healthy family. So this doesn't have to be a big complicated thing. Generally speaking, they teach respect for others. Um, they develop a sense of trust, um, communication. They support one another. Now, to be really clear, when we say we support one another, that doesn't mean that we necessarily agree with each other or that what my family members do, I will do. Support means I acknowledge that that is what you've chosen, and I won't go against you. Um, that's pretty basic, and that's pretty doesn't take into account a lot of nuances. Like if my family members are doing something dangerous, that doesn't mean I'm going to go along with it. But support means it's an understanding that um, this is your direction. I'm going to help you. I might not help you accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. Part of that supportive means I may have to ask you to pause for a minute so we can talk about this. Maybe there's something about this that you're not clear on. That's why you've chosen this. That's what I mean when I say support. We have a sense of positive play and humor. And that can be a tricky one as well, because um, there's a difference between making fun of someone as an endearing thing versus making someone as a way to bring them down, and that can be confused. Now the term gaslighting has become very popular, and that's what gaslighting is. It's making statements that, on the surface, without knowing the context, might sound good, um, but there's certain information in there that maybe others don't know. But it's meant to needle someone. Right? It's meant to um, bring them down a peg, or remind them that they're not perfect, and doing it in a way of control. Right? Um, that's not positive play, and that's not positive humor. And that's not something that should be in a relationship. That's not something that should be in any interactions. A sense of shared responsibility. So you live in a household. There are chores to be done. Um, in the household I grew up in, um, chores were not gender specific. Chores were more ability specific. So, um, and it had more to do with your physical capabilities than anything else. So, um, heavy lifting when I was 6 years old, but by the time I was 10, 11, 12 years old, heavy lifting, okay. Um, cooking. Um, One of the things that my mother would always say as she was teaching us to cook, and I think the first thing I ever learned to cook was a fried egg. Um, it was the first time I ever got a sense of this idea of gender-specific chores. Um, I'd never heard of it. I didn't see it. Um, my mother and father, they basically, if they were there, it needed to be done, they did it. Um, so it was a bit confusing at first, but I remember her saying, um, "You're not always going to have a woman around to do this for you." And it wasn't until I got a little bit older where I understood what she meant, because of this idea of gender specific. Because she and my father did not teach us that there were gender specific chores and duties in a household. It was just this shared sense of responsibility. Now, mind you, we were kids. Sometimes we were lazy teenagers, so we tried to get out of it as much as possible. Um, but we never did not understand that we had this sense of shared responsibility, that we had chores that we had to do, healthy boundaries, a sense of right and wrong, um, all shared, all together. And families teach that. So there's a commonality. So there's this family outlook, um, and you'll see it'll be different family to family. Um, they have a strong sense of positive rituals. So remember, I talked about the bathroom thing. Um, I knew growing up that supper time was 5 o'clock, day in, day out. And we didn't have a lot of money, so my mother and my father were very clear about the grocery list and things like that. So literally, we knew what we were going to eat depending on what day it was. Um, we didn't go hungry. I mean, the food wasn't always like this spectacular things, or it wasn't. I very rarely did we go out to something like McDonald's. I don't ever really remember going out to a restaurant or anything like that. Um, but we didn't go hungry. But we always knew what time supper was, and we also knew, if we weren't home when supper was on, then we didn't get supper. We knew what time we were supposed to have breakfast. We knew what time lunch was. Um, we didn't really need to be told a lot of those things, because it was just expected, and it's what we did. It was part of that routine, and in a sense, it was also respecting the people who were providing this for you. So whoever's turn it was to cook, um, you respected them by being there when it was time to eat. To this day, um, if we decide we're going to have a family gathering, um, if we're told be there for 3, and we get there at 3:15, whoever's there is eating. Simple as that. Um, it's that sense of tradition, ritual, uh, protocol, right? They spend time together. That can be casual, that can be um, formal, it can be planned or it can be unplanned. But there's always this sense, almost like a homing beacon, that certain parts of the day, certain times of the day, certain times of the year, there are certain things that you do together. Um, and you make time for it. Right? That's family. Um, Respecting each other's privacy. So even though you are in a home, um, however large that home is, whether everybody has their own bedrooms or people have to share bedrooms, there is a sense of privacy. You have to have that sense of alone time, and the rest of the family needs to respect that. And any family that works well together um, does respect that, not because they have to, but because they want to. Um, Within reason, sure. If you live in a small house and you have a fair amount of people who live there, um, sometimes the bathroom is the only place where you're going to get that privacy. Now, mind you, parents with young children, sometimes that's not even there. But there's always a sense of knowing what's appropriate in giving that privacy and giving that space. And it's communicated. Right? That's a big thing. About it's communicated. Has to be communicated. So the sense of Gunny Quio really depends on communication. And one of the things that I always talk about is, now mind you, when I say I always talk about it, I didn't have a word for it or a phrase for it until just a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But now what I call it is awkward conversations. You have to be willing to have awkward conversations, because if you're observing something that another family member is doing that is inappropriate, it can be awkward to confront them on that. And when I say confront, that doesn't mean um, puffing out your chest and confronting. All it means is, I need to talk to you. I need to point something out here. So if I had more time, I would go into a whole list of things that have to do with understanding that a confrontation doesn't have to be a fight. Understanding that when we're talking about a confrontation, it's not about winners and losers. It's about opposing ideas being presented and coming to a mutual conclusion for mutual benefit. I'm not comfortable with what you're doing. And then starting from there. That can be very awkward to do. But it has to happen if you're going to have this Gunny Queer, if you're going to have this harmonious household. So you have to be willing to not just have the awkward conversation, but sometimes it means you're going to have to sit down and develop protocols. There's that word protocols again. Sit down and saying, if I have an issue with something that you're doing, I think we need to have a way to enter that discussion. Right? That sounded very formal. That can be very awkward to say. However you need to word it. Because part of that communication is, it's not just you saying what you want to say. It's also about understanding how the person or your audience hears what you're saying. Right? That's why when I say the word confrontation, be clear in what you're saying, because when I say confrontation, I know what I mean. I mean that coming together of opposing ideas. Other people might hear fight. Other people might hear problem. Sometimes that confrontation is just, I'm not understanding this. Can you help me understand it? So you might not want to use a word like confrontation, but you know the people around you better. You know how they hear things. So use that to your advantage. Use that to their benefit. How to approach these kinds of conversations, these kinds of interactions. Right? Because at the end, it's about that harmonious interaction, flow of the household. And the reality is, we are all human beings. We have our own minds. If you approach it from that spiritual side of things. We are not carbon copies of each other. You know, we all have our own minds. We all have our own likes, wants, dislikes. We have our own set of those things. If we were just carbon copies of each other, we wouldn't require any kind of interaction because we just would know. We don't. One of the analogies I have is two people coming together, grew up experiences, and their own list of likes and dislikes, and these two meet, and they have a lot of mutual things that they have in common. They both like horror movies. They both are early risers. They're not night owls. They both like to eat healthy. But there is also going to be things that aren't the same. One likes hamburgers, one likes hot dogs. That doesn't mean one's going to have to give up. It just means when they have that kind of meal, there's going to be hot dogs and there's going to be hamburgers. Right? Just differences. Extrapolate that to bigger things. Part of that harmonious family life, home life, is accepting those differences. That doesn't mean you have to participate in them. That doesn't mean you have to take part in them. Just accept that there's going to be differences and allow for those differences. No, you have two people groups of people. One group likes action movies and the other group likes horror films. So compromises. Maybe one night you're going to watch horror film, next night you're going to watch action film, or however that's going to work out, or however you decide to work out. Because that's another part of that Gunikuyo is negotiation. That's why you have those awkward conversations. That's why that conflict is a presentation of opposing ideas. Because it's about how do we make this work? How do we work together? How do we maintain our harmony? Hope for the positive. But like I said, it doesn't just happen. You have to put in the work to do that. And that's a big part of it. That's probably one of the main things. That's probably the main thing about it is communication. Awkward conversations. But those awkward conversations do not have to have the tension that some people assume will be there if you set ground rules early. And again, sitting down for that, having that conversation about setting ground rules can also be awkward. Because it's not comfortable. It never is. But it's necessary. I don't know how else to really word that. Because that Gunikuyo, yes, you're hoping for the best, but it's also about preparing for stumbling blocks. And stumbling blocks are awkward. So that's a big piece of that Gunikuyo. And remember, there's more commonalities between you than there are differences. So start from the commonalities to address the differences. Be clear that this isn't about winners and losers. This is about mutual benefit. This is about a mutual conclusion. And once you make an agreement, once you decide on that protocol, that doesn't mean it's written in stone either. It can always be readdressed, renegotiated. Circumstances change. You have an angled parking lot in the winter. You park in a way so that if you get a hot and cold moment, and it freezes over, that you guys aren't playing bumper cars in the morning. But in the summertime, you don't have to worry about that. Where you park is a little different, right? That's all it is. It's renegotiating. It's readdressing things, and you have to work that in. Nothing has to be written in stone. Nothing has to be rigid. It can be fluid. It can be readdressed, and that's what negotiation is. Right? Yeah, you have your bottom line, but you also have to give room for leeway, and you also have to have that understanding that your perspective isn't the only perspective. And generally speaking, a lot of times it's not even about right and wrong. One of the analogies that I use is I'll take a Tim Hortons cup and I'll put it between myself and another person. I ask them what they see, and they'll tell me, and I'll tell them what I see. and depending on which way that you're looking at the cup, you're going to say different things. Who's right? Who's wrong? You're both right. You're just looking at it from a different place, right? Keep all that in mind. So with that, it would be good to have a lot more time to talk about this a lot more, but that's the basics of my understanding of gunny quio. It's action, action leading to a state of being. It's not a state of being without action. Yeah. So with that, I hope you're able to take that and use it to help you, your family, weather this thing that we're going through now. Because we have to spend a lot more time with each other if you're living in a household together. It's better to do that happy and harmoniously than to let things sit unspoken, because that will fester. Right? This is the process. Yeah. So for now, down info.